There is a woman you keep noticing. She is not the loudest voice in the room, online or otherwise. Her profile is not the most active. She does not post every day. She does not narrate her meals, her workouts, her moods, her minor frustrations, or the small victories of her Tuesday afternoon. She does not offer explanations when she disappears for 2 weeks. She does not preemptively justify her choices or anxiously fill the silence with content designed to remind you she still exists. And yet somehow, paradoxically, she is the one you keep thinking about. She is the one whose posts you actually stop for, whose words you actually read, whose presence you register, even though, or perhaps because, it is not constant. She occupies space in your mind that the more prolific, more transparent, more perpetually visible women somehow do not. And if you have ever wondered why, this episode is the answer. What you are responding to is not an accident. It is not a personality type or a lucky aesthetic, or the particular algorithm favor of a specific content format. It is something older and more structural than any of that. It is the psychology of scarcity, applied not as a manipulation tactic, but as an authentic expression of a specific relationship with one's own inner life. The mysterious woman is not withholding strategically in the calculating sense of the word. She is withholding because she has learned, or perhaps always understood, that not everything that happens inside her is owed to a public, that her interior world is a resource, not a liability, that the value of what she shares is directly related to the deliberateness with which she chooses it, and that presence, real presence, the kind that generates genuine intrigue and sustained attention, is built through selectivity rather than volume. To understand why this works the way it does, you need to understand a foundational principle of human psychology called the information gap theory, developed by behavioral economist George Lowenstein. The theory proposes that curiosity is generated not by what we know, but by the gap between what we know and what we want to know. When you encounter something that gives you partial information, your brain instinctively reaches toward the missing piece. The gap itself creates a kind of cognitive tension that motivates continued attention. It is why a sentence that ends without resolution is more memorable than one that answers its own question. It is why the person who says just enough and then stops occupies your thoughts longer than the person who said everything. Incompleteness handled with intention is more magnetic than completeness. Your brain cannot let go of an open loop. It keeps returning to the unresolved question, and returning means sustained attention, which in a digital environment is the most valuable currency in existence. Oversharing closes every loop before it opens. When you narrate every stage of your experience in real time, when you share the frustration and then the resolution, and then the reflection on the resolution, when your audience knows where you were last night and how you felt about it, and what you are wearing today and what you are thinking about tomorrow, there is nothing left for them to wonder. And wonder is not a passive state. Wonder is an active, motivated engagement with another person's reality. It is the thing that makes someone come back, not because they liked your last post, but because you left them with a question they could not quite answer about who you are and what you are becoming, and what you might say or do or reveal next. This is not a content strategy. It is a posture. And the distinction matters because posture is sustained in a way that strategy is not. A content strategy is something you apply. A posture is something you inhabit. And the posture of a woman who understands the value of her own interiority does not shift based on engagement metrics or trending formats. It is grounded in a consistent relationship with herself, a relationship in which her thoughts, experiences, feelings, and becoming are hers first, and the world's only by deliberate invitation. Consider what oversharing actually costs, not in the abstract sense of privacy or dignity, though those matter, but in the specific psychological and relational sense. When you share everything as it happens, you bypass the natural process of integration. You take a raw experience directly from the living of it to the narrating of it, without the intermediate stage of actually absorbing it, understanding it, allowing it to become something in you before you put it into words for someone else. This matters Because the experiences that shape us most significantly, the ones that generate real depth and genuine perspective, are not the ones we narrated in real time. They are the ones we lived with, the ones we did not immediately translate into content, but instead allowed to work on us, quietly, over days and weeks and sometimes years, until they became something we actually understood rather than just something we experienced. The woman who overshares is not shallow, but she is often depriving herself of the very process that would give her depth, because depth is what happens in the space between experience and expression. It is what develops in the silence, in the unshared, in the private relationship you have with your own interior when you are not performing it for an audience. And the paradox is that depth, when it finally expresses itself, is precisely what generates the kind of attention and resonance that oversharing never quite achieves. You cannot manufacture depth through volume. You can only create the conditions for it to develop by protecting the silence it requires. Think about a woman named Celeste. She is 35, has been building an online presence for 4 years, and posts 6 to 7 times per week across platforms. She shares her morning routine, her relationship dynamics, her professional wins, her moments of self-doubt, her workouts, her spiritual practices, her family dynamics, her political opinions, her taste in books and film and food. She is, by any reasonable measure, a generous and transparent communicator, and she has an audience who follows her consistently. But when she examined her engagement data carefully, she noticed something that troubled her. Comments and responses were warm but generic. People told her they found her relatable. They said she was inspiring, but nobody seemed surprised by her. Nobody expressed the particular kind of fascination that makes someone stay up later than they intended to watch one more video or revisit an old post to understand something about it they could not quite grasp the first time. She had built familiarity. She had not built intrigue. And the difference between being someone people find familiar and being someone people find fascinating is almost entirely about what you do not say. Strategic presence is not the same as strategic absence, and that distinction deserves careful attention. You are not aiming to disappear, to be withholding in a way that feels punishing or cold, or designed to manipulate someone into wanting you more. That version of scarcity is a performance in its own right, and it is transparent. What you are aiming for is something more honest and more difficult. You are aiming to share from fullness rather than from urgency. To post when you have something that is genuinely ready, genuinely processed, genuinely worth the attention you are asking for, rather than because the content calendar demands it, or because the silence has become uncomfortable, or because you felt the low-level anxiety of not being recently visible and reached for the phone as a response. There is a quality to content that comes from fullness rather than urgency that your audience can feel even when they cannot name it. It has a certain density, a certain settledness, a sense that what you are sharing has been lived with before it was handed over. It does not feel reactive. It does not carry the slight breathlessness of something that was processed in public rather than before it arrived there. It lands with the particular weight of something that has been decided upon rather than compelled. And that weight is what creates authority, not credentials, not follower counts, not production quality. The feeling that the person speaking has taken their own interior seriously enough to let it mature before offering it. The reposition this episode is asking you to consider is a fundamental one. It is a shift from visibility as the primary goal to significance as the primary goal. Visibility asks, am I being seen? Significance asks, when I am seen, does it mean something? And meaning, the kind that actually lands and stays, almost never comes from volume. It comes from intention, from the rare but resonant thing that you chose to say over the many possible things you could have said, from the experience you decided to keep private because it was still becoming something, and the experience you finally shared because it was ready, from the gap between your words that allows the person receiving them to bring something of their own, to participate in the meaning-making rather than simply consuming a completed product. This is the specific quality that makes certain women unforgettable in a digital landscape that is, almost by definition, a space of radical forgettability. Most content is forgotten within hours of consumption, not because it was bad, but because there was no space in it for the audience to inhabit. It was complete, different kind of experience. She creates space. And people, starved for genuine space in a media environment that fills every possible silence with noise, are extraordinarily drawn to whoever offers it. Think about what it means to move through the digital world with this posture in practice. It means asking, before you share anything, not will this perform, and not even is this true, but is this ready? Has this experience finished working on me yet? Do I understand it well enough to offer it? Or am I still in the middle of it? Is this something that will add to what my audience knows about me in a meaningful way, or is it just filling space? These are quiet, private questions that take a different kind of discipline than content consistency. The discipline of restraint, the discipline of sitting with an experience and trusting that your silence is not the same as your absence. There is also a layer here about the specific power that accrues to women who are not fully readable. One of the oldest forms of social influence is the power of not being completely understood. This is not manipulation. It is the natural magnetism of a person who has dimensions that have not yet been revealed, who clearly contains more than what has been shown, whose story is ongoing and unresolved in ways that invite sustained attention. A woman who has shared every thought, every feeling, every doubt, every aspiration, every frustration in real time, has made herself fully legible. And fully legible, while it can generate warmth and relatability, does not generate fascination. Fascination requires the unknown. It requires the sense that there is more here than has been given, that the surface is not the depth, that what you have seen so far is not the whole of what there is. Consider a woman named Marin. She posts once or twice a week, sometimes less. Her content is varied, but never random. Every time she appears, something she says or shows carries the quality of having been thought about seriously before it arrived. She does not explain her silences. She does not apologize for being less consistent than the algorithm would prefer. She does not compensate for her selectivity by being louder or more revealing when she does appear. She simply arrives, says something real, and leaves space around it. And her audience, which is not enormous by platform standards, is extraordinarily loyal and engaged in a way that most creators with 10 times her following are not. Because what Marin offers is not content, it is presence. Genuine, unhurried, deliberate presence. And presence in a world of perpetual performance is the rarest and most valuable thing a person can offer. The reposition from performing visibility to curating significance is not an overnight shift. It requires unlearning the anxiety that silence means irrelevance. It requires trusting that your value does not diminish when you are not constantly reminding people you exist. It requires building a relationship with your own interior that is rich and active enough that you do not need to externalize it in real time to make it feel real. The interior life you protect, the thoughts you develop privately, the experiences you allow to fully land before you translate them, these are not content you are withholding from your audience. They are the source from which everything genuinely good will eventually come. You are not disappearing when you go quiet. You are becoming. What you carry when you have lived with something long enough is visible. Your audience will see it, not in what you explicitly say, but in the quality of everything you bring, the settledness, the specificity. The absence of that subtle urgency that marks content created from anxiety rather than from readiness. When you post from that place, even simple things carry weight, and weight in a landscape of weightless noise is the most powerful thing you can offer. If this episode shifted something in how you think about what you share and what you protect, leave the word depth in the comments. It tells me you are making the transition from visible to significant. Subscribe, because the next episode builds directly on this foundation and goes somewhere that changes how you understand your own influence entirely.